view the nail from its profile. And it may be difficult to tell, but there is a slight curve in the underside of the nail tip. This tip is pretty long, however, so it's not going to be as intense, but the shorter you go, the more evident this is going to appear. For some, this may not be a problem. In fact, some might actually enjoy the curve. But if this is not your cup of tea, it'd be best to invest in pre-made stiletto tips with a straighter edge. Meaning that if I follow the direction of my actual nail, they're gonna look pretty insane, I'm not gonna lie. To make up for this, I have to align my nails in a way that compensates for the misdirection of my nails. And usually this just means applying the tips with my hand facing outwards instead of facing towards me. And after placing down Cricut nail tips hundreds of times, here is where a lot of the difficulty can come in for those struggling with their structure, the dreaded application process. Application for stiletto can be a little bit tricky as the structure of the shape is a bit different from something like square. Not only is it tapered at its sidewalls, but also at its profile. Luckily, our application doesn't have to be perfect here or for any set of nails that you do. You're gonna have lumps, you're gonna have bumps and imperfections, and that's absolutely okay. The main goal in this process is to get as close to the correct structure as you can. This means focusing on maintaining the sidewalls of the nails, creating an apex that supports the length of your personal nails, and allowing that apex to flow and taper off into the free edge of the nail. With time and practice, your skill and intuition will make this process easier and faster. But as a friendly reminder, don't be afraid to take as long as you absolutely need. There is no need to rush through this, and it's totally okay to use smaller beads if you're more comfortable with that. It may be a time-consuming process, and I will bet you anything that it definitely will be in the beginning stages, but developing good structure will help the next process be a lot less strenuous, so take all the time that you need to get the right structure. After your application is complete, the shaping and filing is of course going to be up next. This is going to be a lifesaver for your application if it was a little bit rocky or just not really looking the way you wanted it to. But even despite that, it can absolutely destroy everything if you're not careful. As always, I start out with an 88 grit nail file. These are from Pana, and I find that they have the perfect amount of strength and durability for hard extensions such as acrylic. And that's going to be very important here. Your tools definitely do matter. Of course, I'm not advocating for the most expensive luxury products because expensive doesn't always mean good quality. These files range for about $10 for 10 of these nail files, which may sound like a lot for some. It definitely did for me when I first started out, but with their durability, quality, and lifespan, it's definitely a product worth investing in, especially if you struggle with getting super crisp results, which will absolutely be crucial for stilettos. We'll be starting by correcting the sidewalls of these nails first. Because our tips were applied correctly and we tried our best to maintain the sidewalls during the application, this is going to be a pretty straightforward process. I'll be going back and forth on either side, pausing in between to check my progress, as well as flipping my hand periodically to make sure things are still looking symmetrical. You'll notice that just by shaping the sidewalls and getting that sharp edge back, things instantly look a lot better. And for me personally, whenever I'm doing stilettos, I like to make things as sharp as I possibly can. For some, this may be unnecessary and probably a bit dangerous if you're wearing these in real life, but my nails are simply for artistic expression, so I love a really good sharp stiletto. Next, we'll be gently filing the underside of these nails. It's going to be very important to make sure that you don't overdo it here. We don't want to file into the stress points of our natural nails, and we certainly don't want to create a ledge. So use light pressure and only file what's absolutely necessary. And to really pull this together, we'll move on to filing the surface area of the free edge. As I mentioned before, this is going to be slightly different than a square nail, as we're going to be creating a taper from the apex of the nail all the way down to the tip of the nail. Square nails would typically be a lot straighter, whereas stilettos typically slope downwards. However, because our sidewalls are super pointy and thin, I do like to keep just a bit of thickness when we view the nail from its profile. If we were to follow the very tip of these nails too thin, we do risk them breaking, and we certainly do not want that. So we keep the front view as sharp as we can, and the profile is where we maintain its structure. Next, we'll move on to the cuticle in the apex area. As with the entire shaping process as a whole, this is going to be more of a corrective step, so we won't be doing too much here. Our main goal is to seal the cuticle and make it flush with our natural nail underneath. When working close to my skin and my natural nail, I always lower the speed of my hand drill, and I like to use around 7,000 to 8,000 RPMs. As you can see, I'm moving horizontally from right to left, and I'm applying light pressure as to not overfile and cause any heat spikes. As you can see, I am using a carbide bit, but a sanding band can definitely work here as well, and it's actually ideal for beginners as they give you some breathing room to file. Carbide definitely leaves a smoother result, but removes product much faster. So it may be best to practice with a sanding band before switching to something like this. Even still, the same precautions will apply. Be gentle, work with a slower speed, and keep the bit moving from right to left. After the cuticles have been sealed, I work on the apex area, making sure that it's about 1/3 of the way down the nail. Your apex should be rounded, it should be flush with a free edge, and it should be thick enough to support your nail length. Because my nails are quite long, my apex will be higher to support it. But for shorter nails, this thickness is more than likely unnecessary. Discovering which thickness works for your apex will take time and patience, but at the very least, having an apex period or a highest point of your nail is incredibly important for strength, protection of the stress points, and even shock absorption. To finish off my shaping and prepare it for the nail art, I always buff my nails. I used to skip this process entirely as I figured my carbide bit was enough, but this makes our base even smoother for anything that goes on top of this. So this part never gets looked over for me anymore. And now, here's where we usually get into the nail art. For simplicity's sake, I'll be closing this off with a single layer of top coat. But the most important thing to remember during the nail art is that your gels should be applied in thin layers as to maintain the sharp and crisp stiletto shape. In some cases, you are going to be doing intricate designs, and they're definitely going to require multiple layers, and that can get bulky very quickly. Thinner layers aren't necessarily going to get rid of that possibility entirely, but they can prevent it from getting out of control. And as an extra precaution, I always wipe down the sidewalls before curing. As you can see, my stiletto shape has been maintained and things are looking nice and crispy. With these tips in mind, you are so much closer to mastering your stilettos. Of course, none of this is helpful without execution, so don't be afraid to try the shape, especially if you've never done them before. With practice, time, patience, and faith in yourself, you are sure to get these down pat, and I have faith in that. And with that, I hope that you found this to be helpful. If you'd like to see more videos like this from me, be sure to let me know down in the comments. But that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I will see you guys in the next one.